protect us both together. May He nourish us both. May we work conjointly with great, great energy. May our study be vigorous and effective. May we not argue or cavil with each other. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. So before we start, are there any questions? Wonderful. We can all go home now. So we are commencing a new chapter of the Srimad Bhagavad Gita. This is the 10th chapter. And so we're halfway through. 18 chapters are there. It was pointed out that 18 seems significant. We had the Bhagavad Gita workshop for children on the 18th of this month. There are 18 sections in the Mahabharata, 18 chapters in the Bhagavad Gita. And why are multiples of 9, for example, why would they be of any interest to us? Why would they be in any way special? The idea is that, of course, 9 is in some way a curious number, because any multiple of 9, the digits added together, you arrive at 9. But also, you see, 3 times 3 times 3 making 9 describes the whole of our existence. There are 3 evolutionary forces of nature. The whole of nature only falls into these 3 categories of forces. These are called gunas, things which bind us. And things which you can say tie up the universe. So you can expand the meaning of it to say the things that make the universe run smoothly by virtue of their juxtaposition and relationship to each other. And we'll deal with the effects of these throughout the entire philosophy. Bhagavad Gita, the longest philosophical poem in the world, contains these 18 chapters. And we understand that 3 gunas are there, that's 3. Another 3 will be 3 states of consciousness. Curiously, the Srimad Bhagavad Gita does not make reference to these 3, but Upanishads, of course, make reference to these in many, many different places. The Mandukya Upanishad is completely dedicated to this. So 3 states of consciousness: our normal waking state, and then, of course, when we drift off into a deep sleep, and then in between, a mixture of sleep and memory gives us dream. So that's the second section of 3. The third section of 3 will be that the Lord of the universe has 3 creative faculties: creative, protecting, sustaining, and also dissolving. So creator, preserver, and dissolver is a kind of trinity which in some way we find compatible with the Christian trinity also. So we have Father, which is has a creative capacity, and then we have a Son, which is a sustaining aspect, and then we have a Spirit, which is responsible for energetic, dynamic behavior in the universe. And so we have all these 3, curiously enough, also representing Sat Chit Ananda. When we want to register what is our foundation, we can't give any objective description except to say it is existence itself, it is consciousness itself, and it is bliss itself. Taittiriya Upanishad puts it as Ananta, it is infinite. And when you have infinity, you actually also have bliss. There are no 2 things to argue in order to disturb our peace. So halfway through, why don't we review a little bit what went before, very briefly. We started off with the first chapter, and the first chapter told us that it is important to destroy our delusion. It is our delusion that presents us with 3 aspects of behavior, namely running away from a situation and withdrawing, or confronting and fighting with a certain amount of aggression and destruction in mind, a certain element of harm in mind. And then the third position will be to yield to it and be mesmerized indecisive, not knowing what to do. But another aspect is love. And this love is brought in the last chapter we dealt with, chapter 9. In chapter 9 we find that even Bertrand Russell, so well-known agnostic or even atheist, declared after this great tragedy and disaster of the Second World War that what we require, he said, in the 20th century is, amazingly he says, love. He says, requires extraordinary merit of love. The root of the matter is very simple. And he says, Christian love or compassion, he puts it like that. A non-Christian putting it in this way. That is the same compassion that we find in a Christ. A preparedness to give up everything. Give up the physical body, give up seeming existence itself for the welfare of everybody. We won't find this in any genetic sense. Any relationship that we have is bound to have an egocentricity about it, a self-centeredness about it. But a generosity of spirit that says, I care not for myself, I care others, because I see a unity of existence everywhere. So destroying delusion and make us pursue what? Our spiritual life begins with whatever is on our plate, in situ, wherever we are. That means if your duty is a soldier defending other people and country and so on, then your spiritual life, your spiritual practice is a soldier. If it's a housewife doing the housework, it's as a housewife. A student as a student. A clerical person doing clerical work, that same thing. Somebody who is a college professor, that's their swadharma. Their individual way of harmonizing everything, fitting in to a harmonized scenario where everybody and everything is complementary and a certain smoothness takes place in the social structure. And then the second chapter tells us about the basic principles of life, the way of action, and gives us an image of somebody who's completely harmonized, sthita prajna, somebody of steady wisdom, steady practice, steady behavior, somebody who's not upset at all by the vicissitudes of life. In moments of peace and happiness we find that it's an erratic graph that we're looking at. A high, high, a low, low, but no constancy for it. A kind of like being thrown about by waves in an ocean, in a feisty storm, instead of something that is calm, going through life, not affected by extremes, not affected by what we might call pairs of opposites, too hot, too cold physically, or blame and praise psychologically. And then the third and fourth and fifth chapters deal with essentially karma as a performance of this swadharma, this particular role that you have, this designated duty. And we find that vikarma, really, that is the inward actions that support the outer actions in this swadharma is also mentioned. And when this inner and outer dimensions are one, the mind and heart, they become purified. Cravings weaken us, passions are stilled, differences vanish, and then a kind of non-action takes place. This is of two kinds, we are told, karma yoga, jnana yoga, or karma sannyasa. And at the heart of these, they're really the same. And then we find freedom from this action. That is, we don't not act, we continue acting, but we are free from all the various consequences that upset our equilibrium, our mental equilibrium. And then in 6th chapter we find that one-pointedness is taught and the preparation for it, meditation, and its prerequisite is mentioned in two ways, abhyasa and vairagya. We have to have a constant practice, a constant remembrance, because we are suffering from forgetfulness. We forget our own nature. Our own nature is pure and free and perfect. It is that inner self. It is easy to say, but when we actually see it, when we feel it, when we withdraw and it becomes our very being and presence, then we find the outer world changes. Our inner psychological world changes. Everything changes. And then the 7th chapter, 7th and the 9th chapter tell us about various glories, various aspects that can guide the mind, guide the attention inwards to our blissful base. It is the 10th chapter that gives us the detail about it. Again, coming back, the chapter in between, the 8th chapter, gives us a sense of constancy and the necessity for constancy. Our continuing sadhana, spiritual practice. We shouldn't ask how long do we have to practice. We practice patiently with persistence and dedication. We practice to the end of our life and beyond. We never ask how long, never look back. You know, if you're running a race, the athletic coaches will tell you, if it's 100 meters, don't look back to your opponent. You haven't got time for that. You'll lose precious seconds. Don't worry about who else is there and what other things are encroaching on your life or your peace of mind. With determination, go to the end. With this sense of dedication, go there. And then we find this dedication comes out in this chapter 9 in particular. Everything we need to do, everything we think, every action, we do it for the Lord of the universe. This is a very easy way of practicing, but it requires dedication. Is dedication so easy when we have so many different distractions around us? It is a royal path. It is a Raja Yoga. It requires extraordinary merit, but above all, it's a very simple formula. So simple that some intellectuals find it even embarrassing to bring out. It's just love. I think it was a famous popular band that said, all you need is love. I can hear you saying that kind of thing. It's all right. So how do we make this easy? Seeing God in nature should be very easy for us, but we find it very difficult. And so here we find the Srimad Bhagavad Gita with a specified, dedicated chapter, Vibhuti Yoga, the yoga of divine manifestations. It is the yoga where we highlight the power of the manifested glory of the divine. We can view things, the whole of nature, as individual units of adapters. Philosophy calls this upadhi, which is unfortunately translated as a limiting factor. No doubt the glory behind it is in some way limited, or streamlined, we should rather say. But is it not also a functioning adapter? How do we know that light is manifested through a light bulb? The light bulb takes the infinite, as it were, electrical current and manifests it as light through the light bulb. What is the sun? It's an adapter. What is the moon? It's an adapter, a reflective adapter. What is the body? It's an adapter. If we can view everything in this way as an adapter that reflects and expands, as it were, radiates the glory that sits behind it, then our whole psyche will change. Our whole outlook will change. An internal joy will well up inside of us. And every moment of the day could be a captured moment of this supreme blissful joy, this sublime rapture that we can have the opportunity to experience moment by moment if we carefully craft this attitude. If you take, for example, the first thing that, or the first person that a child will see when the vision clarifies, when the blurredness goes away a little bit, we find it's the mother. Matra Dev Bhava, let your mother be a god to thee. Where does a mother get this idea of love? It's not for her own benefit. There's an internal kind of instinct. But what we call instinct, is it not really our innermost nature helplessly exhibiting itself, urging us, and we call this a natural thing. It's natural for the mother to be nurturing. Not just in the human species, in more or less every species we find this nurturing aspect of a mother, this motherly aspect. Does it not give us a clue about something that is deep within, that manifests outside? And wherever we look, we can find these clues. And so these are highlighted in this chapter. So we can begin. This is Vibhuti Yoga, the yoga of divine manifestations. We can say the yoga of powerful manifestations that manifest from within everywhere. We can see that if we make God the pole star of our life, then He's manifested in the universe, and this can become obvious to us. And this chapter begins not with a question, as many chapters begin, with Arjuna asking a question, seeking clarification. But the Lord, inspired as it were, from the 9th chapter, where it ends up by saying, by exhorting us to fix our mind, manmanaha, with the mind filled with me, be thou bhava, mad bhaktaha, my devotee. With that last statement, he picks it up again and says, let us go now into great detail on this source of everything, establishing what is the source of everything. So the verse goes, Priya eva mahabhav shno me paramam vachaha yatteham priyam manaya vakshami hitakam yaya. So again, this is a repeated thing that he's giving, but just so it sticks in the mind. Some clarification is necessary. You know, they say that if you were to learn something for the first time, a minimum of 6 repetitions have to be there. So you'll find it's necessary to give this message again. Again, almighty arm, that means somebody who has the capacity to move forward and understand these subtle messages and understand the glory and the origin which is there. So here, listen to my supreme word. Listen to my supreme word or supreme message out of a desire to do you good, for no other reason. I wish to speak of it to your absorbing delight. Let me stand here, the Lord says, and let me now delight you. Delight you by highlighting, here's a beautiful manifestation, did you notice it? And the way in which we do it is in the way a small child learns. We take the most obvious examples. It's easy to catch the glory of the divine in a mountain scenery, or in a lake or a nature scene. It's easy to see this divine glory in somebody who we relate as being a good person or an exemplary person. It's easy to see God manifest as Rama. But is it easy to see God manifest as Ravana? And yet, Ravana is also a manifestation. People often ask 2 things, of course. You say all this love, you see. You should love everybody and so on. But what about a Hitler, they bring it out? What about somebody who seems manifestly evil? Can you see in there? Well, it's not so easy, but why don't we take it step by step? Why don't we take the obvious examples first, where we can easily see the Lord and His manifested glory. And then bit by bit, section by section, let us look at the other things. Not all at once. It's easy to see the cuteness in a puppy or a kitten, but maybe it's not so cute to see it in a spider, in Zimbabwe we have things called rain spiders. So around about this time of year, well, beginning of the rainy season, really, October or so, in our country anyway. So we find what is called a rain spider. It's at least 3-4 inches long and has big tentacles at the front. And it has a habit of running toward you, not away from you. So you find many chairs are occupied by people being chased by this spider, but it's completely harmless. But its natural defense is, let me run toward you and maybe you'll run away. And that's exactly what happens in nature's inbuilt device for self-protection. So what a glory this is. But it's not the most beautiful species of organic life on the planet. But still, what makes it move? What is this prana that makes it move? And what is its origin? So we need to explore what is the origin. And so out of a desire to do you good, not just to give you some lesson or lecture or assert my superiority necessarily, but out of a desire, out of compassion, because of love, I wish to speak to it and to your absorbing delight. See, the psychological fact is made and is evident here. And the Vedantic verdict, wonderful is the teacher, and equally clever is the pupil. And this is more than proved by Sri Krishna and Arjuna, when the Lord imparts in the life-saving ambrosia to Arjuna. Now, the next question really is, by what grandeur can there be in a personality bound in this mortal coil, as it were, bound by material organic life? So the Lord answers, and he answers himself. So he tells us this. Name viduhu sura gamaha prabhavam na maharshasha shaya aham adehi devanam maharshinam cha sarvashaha. Neither, that is neither the hosts of devas nor the great rishis know my origin. It's a great question today. What is the origin of life? Charles Darwin writes a book, The Origin of Life, or The Origin of the Species, by Natural Selection. He writes a book like that. Everybody's keen to know what is the origin. Once you know the origin, then you have a very key component. You really have the key to life. People are questioning, how did this life form? What was the abiogenesis that created this world? And they're even curious to know, beyond this, it wasn't very long ago that when we looked out into the night sky, all we saw was our own galaxy, our own Milky Way. We never suspected there was anything beyond it. We looked at these stars blinking and we thought, this is our universe. It took our modern technology that increased the scope of our eyesight to see that what we saw twinkling and blinking were other galaxies, and the galaxies are immense and huge, light years across, something like 30,000 light years from here to the center of our own galaxy. Imagine. And we are simply a small dot or so as a part of it. This vastness was never suspected, not to mention the space in between. But the ancients would have registered it like this. You know, in the Gayatri Mantra we have this reference to Bhu, Bhuha, Swaha. Of course 7 other worlds are there, Janaha, Tapaha and so on. But the summary is these 3 worlds, this world, this familiar observable universe, and the shining thing that is beyond it, beyond our reach, whatever is vast beyond it. That is, we assume that this observable universe has some kind of border, and beyond it, controlled by a kind of border, a speed of light, 186,000 miles per second. And beyond that, We don't know. So some world beyond that. Now we say that there could be a realm like that, a realm of the devas. And then what about the interspace between, the antaraksha? This interspace is catered for too. This world, the world beyond, and the interspace between. But none of these entities, even if there were alien beings elsewhere, or parallel universes, or demi-governors, entities that are given governance over an aspect of the universe, or even if these are nature's forces, subtle forces that we call tanmatras, whatever they are, they don't know the origin. They are also left with this question, what is the origin? And these great rishis which are there, rishis referring of course to a certain mythological aspect of the universe whereby the universe, the Lord who is Hiranyagarbha, that is the golden seed or the golden womb, that is also called prana, the energetic, dynamic, moving force. And it is also called that supreme Atman. All of these are the same entity. The story goes that he created 4 entities that will carry forth the universe, and they were so pure and dedicated to the truth and to their own, to the supreme divine, that they lost themselves in meditation and could therefore not create more than this, could not manifest further. And so the legend goes that 7 rishis, Sapta rishis, 7 rishis had to be born, who had an element of worldliness. Not much, but something, enough to carry forth these material manifestations. And then of course there were 4 Manus, who also were involved in this. That's the mythological side of it. Even those do not know this origin, this divine origin. For in every respect, he says, I am the source of the Devas and the great rishis. And you cannot know your own source as an object. We know from philosophically, the seer can never be seen. The witness can never be witnessed. The knower can never be known. The thinker can never be thought of. The subject can never become an object. To reverse it would be like saying, the Swami likes bananas, the Swami eats bananas, when will the bananas eat the Swami? You can't put it like that. It doesn't make any sense. So the divine breeze, says Sri Ramakrishna, blowing from the ocean of Sat Chit Ananda Brahman, transports people into ecstasy. Shanaka, Sanantana, and other ancient rishis got themselves perfected by this divine breeze. A mere glimpse of this ocean sent Narada into raptures. Narada of the Narada Bhakti Sutras, an entity that is supposed to be the lover of all lovers of the Supreme. A mere glimpse of this ocean sent Narada into raptures. Sukha, the born Brahmajnani, touched this water but once and got himself filled with Brahmavashta and wandered the world as a divine lad. Shiva, the cosmic teacher, took only 3 sips from this great ocean and became dazed with transcendental bliss. Indeed, who can measure the depth or the characteristics of the infinite ocean of Brahman, says Sri Ramakrishna. It's a great mystery to everybody trying to analyze how this universe was born, how was it constructed, where is its origin. In modern science, the standard cosmological model brings us back to an impossible scenario where all the laws of physics break down completely. They are not brought forth at all. And a proposed movement, something like what we say, Brah, which is compatible, of course, with our way of thinking that a Brah, that's something that expands infinitely. But the mechanism of it, unfortunately, violates all of the laws of physics and therefore is in the realm of speculation. In other words, it comes back to a mystery. How does Brahman serve us? Us meaning the ordinary aspirants. So, Sri Krishna gives us a clue. If you happen to know, it's not that the origin cannot be known. It is not known. But it's not that it cannot be known. Because he who knows me as unborn and beginningless, yo mam ajam anadincha veti loka maheshwaram asammutha sa varti eshu sarva papai pramuchate. He who knows me as unborn and beginningless, as the great Lord of the worlds, he among mortals is undeluded and freed from all sins. In these Shastras nobody insults anybody, but the nearest to it would be this word asammudaha, undeluded, or the other way, deluded. So you see, asam means that non-deluded. All the delusion is gone, but the opposite is deluded. Now we're all under a delusion. Nature has built into it a delusion mechanism. If it wasn't like that, all our species would stop. If it wasn't like that, of course, nobody would be struggling. Everybody would be full of knowledge. There'd be no need to do anything. So, is it possible to know this origin? Because something that is unborn and beginningless must out of necessity be an origin. The root of a tree is not seen, but we know it's there by virtue of the tree. We won't dig the root up just to verify, is it true? Somebody said there was a root. Is it true? The root of the origin is unseen. Should we therefore dismiss it in a mood of atheism and say we can't see it? I'll always remember the first cosmonaut that went up into space and came back, and of course the atheistic Soviet Union, no longer atheist, now is Russia, they made a big statement, and Khrushchev was the man in charge. And we don't know if he was joking, half joking, or deadly serious, but he said, Yuri Gagarin went up, and you see, he looked left and right, up and down. He never saw this God. He never saw the old man with the white beard. And so we were right all along. Atheism triumphs. God does not exist. You see, this is a caricature of what we mean. When people ask the Vedantin, do you believe in God? We say yes, and more. And more? The great mystic, Christian mystic, Meister Eckhart, had this expression translated into English with God and Godhead. It's not that there are two things. There is a transcendent, there is an immanent. There is a personal, there is an impersonal. There is the Lord who is the creator. There is the Lord who is the sustainer. These are not two different things. There's the Lord that is the dissolver. These are not three things, separate things. This is one entity. This is one entity that we can relate to, that we can love, that can love us, that looks after us, that protects us, wherein we can take refuge. But there is a transcendent aspect, unborn, beginningless, timeless, spaceless, undefined. Cannot think of such a thing. So there is more. There is always a plus. Vedanta is a system of pluses. Do you think that the material universe exists? Oh yes, but there's more. Oh, do you think that it is idealism, that ideas are there? Yes, and there's more. Oh, do you think then that there are angels and so on? Yes, and there's more. Devas, yes, and there's more. Do you think, therefore, that there's a controlling mind, controlling the universe, some cosmic mind, which we call a personal God? Yes, yes, and there's more. Do you think there's an unmanifest, unvyakta? Yes, and there's more. There's a supreme entity that sits there, untouched. How we get from that being to becoming is a mystery. And if you read the Jnana Yoga lectures and so on, Swami Vivekananda gives, he addresses this subject beautifully. How we get from being to becoming, from non-existence in the conventional sense, to existence in a relative sense. How we go from the absolute to the relative. It's a wonderful, wonderful mystery. And you see, people of a materialist bent of mind will ask these questions, which they think are conclusive questions. They say, who caused the first cause? You say that there's a God who is a first cause. Well, who created that? And then who created that? Where was the second-hand shop God went to make the universe? And who created that? And so it goes on ad infinitum. Of course, the theologians stop it there. And they say, because you cannot have an infinite regress. This is an uncaused cause. But then the materialist says everything has to be bound within the causal laws, relative laws of materialism. And so this is a conclusive proof. You cannot have a God because any material cause has to have another cause. And cause and effect goes on, and so it is. And of course, when it suits people, we find that there is a deterministic universe and an indeterministic universe, depending which side you want to switch to make an argument. If you say that this is fully deterministic, then there's no free will. No free will means the theological God doesn't exist and morality is just a social convention. Or if you say, no, it's indeterministic, and therefore you have will, and that at a certain level it has to be indeterministic. So this question of free will is an eternal philosophical question. But knowledge is the antidote to everything. You know, penance in religion does not remove this delusion. Only thing that removes this delusion is knowledge. And so how do we get this knowledge? This is not knowledge of an intellectual type. This is not learning knowledge. This is not college curriculum. This is deep down knowledge where I say, I know. And when you know, you no longer have to repeat. All spiritual practice goes by itself. Don't give it up before then. How will you know, is often a question asked. How will I know when I've got all this? When I've reached this state of perfection? It's an absurd question, really, despite the fact that the question comes from a well-meaning questioner. Because how you know is a contrary term to knowledge. I know. How will you know? I know. How do you know your name? You have to rehearse it. Does it get depleted with use? Every time you write a check, you say, oh, I need to repeat. I wrote 3 checks today. I need to repeat my name 3 more times. You don't have to do that. So when you know something, you don't have to repeat it. It's established. So he who knows me, what does that mean? That me is unborn and beginningless. Unborn and beginningless. Katha Upanishad calls it unflickering also. Steady, unflickering consciousness. So this ajna, this unborn and beginningless, no time resides within it. No motion therefore resides in it. No registration of a motion can reside in it. And unborn, therefore, unborn, eternal, never dying, never being born. And ultimately we say this is your true nature, ultimately, at the ultimate point. But from the personal God point of view, also unborn beginningless, as the great Lord of the worlds. He among mortals, those who are not unborn, those who are not beginningless, those who are subject to time and spatial objectivity, he among mortals is undiluted and free from all sins. What do sins mean? Those things which cannot be removed by any activity except this knowledge. Because what we mean by sin is ignorance. How do we get to the state of ignorance? There's another question. But we know it's there. And we know it's there because without that, the game played by Mother Nature ceases without it. The 2 factors that delude us are the necessity to propagate the species. The origin of the species of Darwin really hinges on this natural selection. Natural selection really is another way of saying the one that is able to reproduce the species the best and the most prolifically is the winner. It will perpetuate the species and will survive the most. It boils down to that. So reproduction is a genetically inbuilt thing. And then the next thing is what we call streaming negative entropy on ourselves. Entropy is a state of scrambledness. But we don't find ourselves scrambled. We find ourselves in an incredibly complex machine. There are people who are in the intelligent design movement who say every cell has a mechanism that is a symptom of irreducible complexity, and they cite one particular example. They cite two. The development of the eye. Half an eye, a quarter of an eye, a fraction of an eye will not be of much use to us. Now, there are some neo-Darwinist evolutionary people who say, no, even half an eye is better than none. But what will you do with half an eye? I don't know, except put a patch on it and look like a pirate. That could be done. But the other aspect of it is there's a certain bacteria that swims, and you'll find it has a tail that actually rotates like this and projects the bacteria. Bacteria means something that is half a micron by 1 micron. A micron is 1,000th of a millimeter. And whole populations wondrously moving like this. To watch it under a microscope, an electron microscope, is a wonder in itself. But then to see further and see the intricate mechanism of it, you'll find it is like a cog, a bearing is there. You'll find that's a machine. Seems to be a specially constructed machine. So this is a great controversy, because neo-Darwinists dismiss it and say, no, it cannot be. Why? Because it cannot be. And then the other people will say, look, it's a machine specifically designed. And then if you find something that is in itself irreducibly complex, that means you cannot reduce it further, it has a specific function and no other function, then Darwin himself declares, this is the end of my theory. So this is a hotly contested thing. You can believe it or not, it's up to you, but the debate is out there. So this irreducibly complex thing is a way of us understanding that this is against our entropy, that is scrambledness. It in fact is complex, is going from a chaotic condition to an ordered, complex thing that either is designed or looks as if it's designed. If you are of the intelligent design camp, you'll say it is intelligently designed. But if you are the neo-Darwinist materialist, you'll say, no, it only looks designed. It looks designed. And so the great neo-Darwinist Richard Dawkins makes a point. He writes a book called The Blind Watchmaker. And of course, some would say that the way he describes it is random, no purpose, just somehow assembling something without knowing what it is or how it's constructed, is not a blind watchmaker, it's a comatose watchmaker actually. Anyhow, we leave those arguments to them, and that's fine, but these two directives, genetic directives, are available to us. And what we mean by this knowledge, and what we mean by getting rid of this ignorance, overthrowing this ignorance, is really to transcend these two genetic directives, namely stringing negative entropy on ourselves through eating, drinking, etc., sustaining the organic life on the one side, and on the other side, from this procreation urge. Now Sri Ramakrishna puts it in a different way. He calls it, in English we've translated it as woman and gold, or lust and greed. If it's two women, it's man and gold. Lust and greed is his way of summarizing these two genetic directives. Is it possible to transcend this? Is it possible to get out of the delusion? Delusion is the machine that keeps things going. When you see, what you see is what you get, that understanding, this is called ignorance. And we are all suffering from this. Or, if you say, who is or what is the entity that is under the spell of ignorance? Is it not actually free? So we may also characterize it as forgetfulness. We have forgotten our real true nature. So in his absolute state, Brahman, that is the Supreme, the Absolute, is unknown and unknowable. But the threefold nature of the seer, the seen, and the process of seeing is not in him. But in his transcendental state, a glimpse of reality is intuited by the perfected ones, like the rishis. So they realize the existence of the imperishable as the basis of the perishing nature that we call Prakriti. This contact is like the looking at the infinite sky through a small peephole. Imagine now you have a roof and there's a small hole in your roof and the sun beams through it and you see a small circle on your floor. Then the more that is opened, the wider the circle of light becomes, until ultimately, when the whole roof is taken off, the whole thing is seen. But this realization is very important to a spiritual practitioner. He intuits that the Lord is unborn and beginningless, and that he is the supreme sovereign of the worlds. And after knowing this truth, he is no more deluded about the functioning of the phenomena. This world ceases to be a mystery thereafter. It dissolves. Now there is one mechanism that the Lord uses, and we call this vivarta, that is apparitional causation. So this, what we call this maya, or the thing that is measured, or the aspect which seems to delude us and seems to liberate us also, that we call prakriti or nature, this works through a mechanism called vivarta, apparitional causation. And we are quite familiar with the various examples in Vedanta where this is given, the snake, the rope, and so on. So all of this. Two aspects are there in this whole thing. One is compared to, and Sri Ramakrishna does it, a snake that does not move. And then the snake when it moves. These two aspects are there. One is the transcendent, and one is the immanent, the moving. One is the unchanging, the immobile, the eternal, and the other one is the moving, the dynamic. We have to introduce, if we want to be truthful to it, the word seeming. It seems to move. The materialist turns it the other way around. It seems to be designed. Is the opposite to what we are saying. It seems to be a phenomenon. It seems to be a reality. It seems to be material. It seems to be like this. It definitely seems to be like that. And our gut tells us it is like this. But this is what we call ignorance. So, this Brahman, the Supreme, filters himself down further into immanence. And what we're viewing as the world is, and what we're using, we're registering as all these manifestations, all these different individual units that we see and hear and touch and taste, is nothing more, therefore, than fragmented God. We have to introduce seemingly fragmented God, since this absolute cannot be fragmented. Seemingly fragmented God. Realization of this, of course, gives us this freedom from ignorance. And the only sin, of course, is this ignorance. When we say papaya from all sins, we really mean this liberated, so pramuchyate, liberated from this ignorance. So this, as this immanent aspect, in this aspect of his, he is available to the ordinary seekers, the ordinary sadhakas. Buddhe janam asamoha kshama satyam tamasamaha sukham dukkam bhavo bhavo bhayam cha bhayam eva cha. Buddhi, intellect, wisdom, non-delusion, patience, truth, self-restraint, calmness, pleasure, pain, birth, death, fear, and fearlessness. These are all some of the mechanisms, some of the virtues that need to be cultivated in us in order to remove this ignorance. But where do they come from? Do we develop them? Are they within us? To an extent, of course they are. They are within us potentially. But where do they come from? The same origin as everything else. So intellect, that is the faculty of grasping matters, the fact of making decisions, a kind of spark that says, I am above every other creature intellectually. I can appreciate the aesthetics of art and culture. I can work out the complexities of mathematics and try to decipher all the technology and technological and mathematical aspects of my environment. With all this capacity, this intellect, I in no way can take ownership of it because it comes from him. So the intellect is his. Intellect, wisdom. This sounds very much like the Enneagram. There's a certain personality on a certain personality system would say, I am wise. In brackets it means you're foolish. You're all fools. If I say I'm wise, it means you're fools. So you see, this kind of thing, no. All wisdom comes from him. All internal insight, all spirituality. We have this saying, it came to me. Some inspiration came to me. See how we very much praise those people who are inventive and creative. People like Tesla, or people like the person who is now in vogue. I can't think of his name offhand. Musk, yeah, exactly, yeah. Einstein and so on, all these great giants. Where are they getting the inspiration from? They're getting the inspiration from the internal origin, which is the Lord. And all they're seeing is a reflection. So jnanam, wisdom, non-delusion, patience. Patience is again, it sounds very much like this personality workshop. See, there are some people who require above everything else patience. And patience means a sense of time where you want to squeeze everything into now, this moment. And then there's a sense of frustration when nothing happens, nothing moves. Or an irritation with others. There was it last week, I think it was, and I mentioned Saint Teresa of Lisieux, how she had to cultivate this patience by taking the very objects of her reaction and converting them, transforming them into divine offerings. What a wonderful system, making them, in poetic language, beautiful flower offerings to the Lord. Imagining them and offering them. So patience, but patience comes from that entity. Truth, self-restraint, calmness, pleasure, pain, birth, death, fear, fearlessness. In this world we not only have these versions, these great virtues, but we also have these two opposites in life that seem to swing in our psyche, one to the other, pleasure and pain. We try and catch the pleasure and resist the pain. Death, fear and fearlessness, all of this comes from that. We don't need a separate entity to create the negativity. We don't require a different entity called a Satan. We just require a correct tuning. When we correctly tune, we align the mind and the attention to this origin, this blissful base. So this asamoha, or non-delusion, is the clarity of the mind, even in critical and trying situations. Don't think it comes from you, and if you feel you do not have these qualities, then naturally you need to ask the Lord, Lord, these qualities come from you. You are the holder of these treasures. Won't you give this to me? You know, even when we are repeating the Arti prayer, each verse there can be an inserted request, you know, because you are a conqueror, say, of lust and greed. Won't you give this to me, the same conquest to me? Each one can come with a request. What is Satyam? Truth. Satyam is a quality that makes us relate to something as it is, not as we think it is. And so it creates this equanimity between what we think, what we say, and what we do. All of these qualities, if they are necessary for us to cultivate, comes only from one source, from one entity. And then Dhamma House self-restraint is a control of the external senses. No meditation can take place unless we assert this sense of control of the senses and the mind. We can cultivate all these qualities, and then our meditation is sweet. And then somehow calmness is the practice of quietude of the mind and intellect. That's where we find the still entity. Be still and know that you are God, is the statement. We only find it when there is this inner calmness, this inner tranquility, where thoughts are not going here or there, or where the senses are not being pulled in different directions. This inner thing, this inner quiet pool, if you like, of deep, deep wisdom is within us. And then some other things, ahimsa, samatha, tushtis, non-injury, equanimity, and this tushtiha, this contentment, tapaha, austerity, charity, fame, and then this other aspect, this obloquy, this sense of all these different qualities come up. These arise. Where do they arise from? They arise from this one source. So this fame and ill fame, both together, they all arise. Beings arise from me alone. These qualities, these different qualities, arise from me alone. When we observe them, can we not trace, they come from me? Now, what we're doing here is we're observing all the various waves and aspects and functions and activities of the mind. All of these come up from time to time in the mind. And when we observe them, we can surely say, Lord, they arise from you, a kind of eternal ocean that erupts in these various manifestations. All of these mental aspects are manifestations, or as we earlier said, adapters, if you will. One adapter, the mind, exhibiting different manifestations. Who are they that have been the vehicles for the abundant expression of the glories of this Ishvara? Well, we'll finish off with this. We mentioned earlier, Maharshaya Supta Purve Chat Varo Manavastata Vadbhava Manasa Jata Yesham Loka Imaha Prajaha. The 7 great rishis that I mentioned previously, and the 4 ancient Manus that I mentioned previously, endowed with my power, were born of my mind, and from them have come forth all the creatures in the world. So this is a mythological representation, no doubt. But these are really the various phases of cosmic reality coming. We can interpret it in this way. The point is this: everything that in our familiar world, actually, all these are manifestations of that one entity. We don't have to look for any dualism in it. We don't have to look for any creator and creation separate, which gives us many theological difficulties and problems. You can say the one being, the one entity, manifests all this from himself. In the Bhagavatam, in the separate volume, 11th chapter, the Uddhava, there's a conversation between Krishna there, and he mentions, don't think, I'm paraphrasing, don't think this is a cruel joke on you. This is a wonderful divine play on myself. So we have to try and get this way of thinking by taking all these examples as we have and as we will, and seeing there's something that arises, something that I observe, internally or externally. Can I use this and trace it back to its origin of blissful base? And there I find you. Can we discover the Lord in all these manifestations? And going into this in great detail as we're doing, we find that we can learn to be more observant of these things and to register it to its correct originator and correct creator, if you will, or manifester. All these are various glorious manifestations of this one entity. Taking advantage of this capacity to do this, we can elevate our spirit for ourselves and others, and eventually move progressively towards this wonderful goal of blissful freedom, or being one, a delightful union, or a mystic union with the Lord of the universe. We'll pick this up next week then. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace beyond all. Some announcements. So bear in mind that we have